Welcome to Software Without Borders, where we delve into the limitless potential of software and how it's transforming businesses globally. I'm your co-host, Jared Striner, and with me is my co-host, the CEO of Accelerance, Andy Hilliard. What happens when you fail to understand the client's perspective when choosing a software development partner? It can lead to missed expectations, wasted time, and costly miscommunications. In today's episode, we tackle this crucial topic with the person who's responsible for delivery to the client, Jeff Scott, the Chief Delivery Officer at KMS Technology Incorporated, with over 30 years of IT leadership and expertise in bridging the gap between business and technology. Jeff reveals what clients truly need from their software partners. So whether you're a CTO, developer, or business owner, this is a must-listen conversation. Let's dive in. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jared. It's great to be here.
So Jeff, why don't you tell us about your journey and specifically how about your current role came about and the company you're with?
I started my journey with a large enterprise company, again, a little over 30 years ago. And I spent around 24 years there being the client, being the guy that was, in the early stages of using offshore talent. Primarily it was India based. And we worked with a variety of teams all around the country. I had the opportunity to travel there twice and get to know the culture and the people and the teams we were working with. And I felt like over time, I was able to figure out what it was like to be a good client, because that takes time. When my journey with that company ended and my new one began with KMS around 6 years ago, I decided intentionally that I didn't want to jump to another company, another enterprise where I was a client. I wanted to be on the other side of the table and experience what it was like to be the vendor. And I got that full force when I joined KMS. What was interesting is when I first joined, I learned that KMS was a smaller company and that we had offshore teams. And I asked, well, where are your offshore teams located? And they said, Vietnam. And I said, no, really? I didn't know they built the software in Vietnam. That's where all other kinds of things were built, but I didn't know software was built there. And I've come to learn, very quickly when I got to visit the teams and get to know them very well, that we do really good software in Vietnam. And that it just opened my eyes to all kinds of experiences that software done in Eastern Europe and in Europe and LATAM and Southeast Asia and Asia, and more broad. And it just really excited me more and more to be a part of this part of the equation in terms of providing value to our clients.
Yeah, Jeff, having spent, first and foremost, I want to state that partners that have leaders that have spent significant time in not only in the American culture, but working on the client side, working on the company side in systems and software are my favorite partners, because they really understand it from the perspective of the client. They've been there, they've been through the challenges, they've dealt with the stakeholders. They understand how these operations work, and it's super important to do that. So first and foremost, I just want to state that that's really great. But what motivated you, or what you spent so many years at State Farm, and it seems to me that not too many people might be thinking that they'd like to be on the other side. It's a very different environment, and you're certainly used to that certain type of role in that certain type of company. There's so many differences. I mean, what was motivated you to do the change?
Well, I quickly realized I moved. My previous company, I lived in central Illinois for many, many years, and it was fairly isolated in terms of the environment, the population, and our company was the only company in the main company in that geography. When I got the opportunity to move down here to Atlanta, it exposed me to a lot of other companies, a lot of other products, a lot of other technologies that we hadn't had an opportunity to explore with my previous company. And when I got that opportunity to move, I said, where can I go where I'm going to learn the most? One is the experience of being on the other side of the table, but how am I going to, if I go with one other company, I'm going to learn one tech stack, one set of problems to solve. When I'm with an outsourcing partner, a solution provider like us, custom software development, I've got limitless numbers of problems to solve, limitless numbers of technology stacks to understand, and potential customers, and potential friends and partners to engage with. So it was very eye-opening and very educational for me. And it was, the greatest period of growth professionally to switch completely from one type of company to another.
And clearly looking at a role in a service provider that is maybe from India or Eastern Europe or even Latin America. But to your point, Vietnam centric. I mean, relatively a new and embryonic country that is providing services now primarily to other Asian countries like Japan, but somewhat new to the American market. And I do want you to give us more context around KMS specifically, because even though we're both saying that they're Vietnamese, it's not a pure play. I mean, it has aspects of the company that do not, give the impression that it is co-located and only in Vietnam. They do have other aspects, and I'd like for you to talk a little bit about one, in your risk profile, you choosing a location like Vietnam, and two, what sort of mitigating factors in that due diligence of yours in determining whether or not you were to go work for them, did it feel okay for you to make that leap? It's already a big leap, and
how did
you?
So number one, for me to get comfortable with the company, I got to know the leadership. I got to work with the CTO directly. I got to work with the president and founder of the company directly, and our head of marketing and head of sales. I got to know them right away, and they're all located here in the Atlanta area. Our founder, his name is Vu Lam, is from Vietnam. So the reason we were located in Vietnam, one of the reasons is a core group of the founding fathers of the company are Vietnamese, and Vu. There's a long history behind him, reason for going back and investing in Vietnam and his country, but it's basically giving back to his homeland and investing in a place where there was a strong technology group, a budding talent base that was young and exciting and energetic and really wanting to do a good job in this market. And he saw an opportunity and he leapt at it. And we KMS are one of the early entrance into the Vietnam technology market and technology field, and have been one of the major players, big fish in a small pond, if you will, in terms of players and different companies in Vietnam that we compete with. But it's once I get to know the people, and when you get to visit with the folks, you get an interest, an immediate comfort level with their talent, their abilities, their capabilities. You break down those barriers of communication, for instance. Am I going to be able to understand them? Are they going to be able to understand me? And the more that you talk, the more that you interact, you just get a sense that, they're people that just happen to live on the other side of the planet. They have the same desires, the same goals, the same fears, the same motivations that I do. It's just in a different place.
I mean, that's why your perspective is so valuable, and that is you're evaluating them whether or not to work with them based on your discernment as to whether you would hire them or work with them as a client. And you have so much experience in determining what's smoke and mirrors and what's reality and what is trustworthy and what is not trustworthy. A lot of service providers are, yes, they develop software, but they're just selling. They're selling. And they're not looking at it from the perspective of the client. And you truly are coming to it purely from the perspective of having been a client for so long, having been a buyer of services. And so you bring some authenticity, credibility, and truth, I think, to the entire organization, because you're speaking on behalf of the client, more so than on behalf of the service provider.
Well, thank you. I don't often think of it that way, but you're right. I mean, it does. Hopefully, it does add some credibility. But but it's true as well. And one of the things that we do a fair bit of due diligence audits and assessments of product companies when they're a lot of PE-backed companies are looking for exits or looking for investments. And one of the telltale signs is, does the paperwork and the architecture and the documentation and their process match the results? Does what they say they do equal what they do? And one of my early warning signs or early telltale signs with KMS was, I heard the story from the CTO and the president and everybody, we're not just butts and seats, we're consultant. We're going to tell you how it is. We're going to be very truthful. We're going to be leading in technology expertise. And then when I went to actually go visit the first time, I got to experience it firsthand, and it was exactly as it was sold. They're not going to just say yes sir, no sir. They're going to say, I don't know that I necessarily agree with you here, and here's why. And we got to have good constructive conversations, and that's what I would want as a partner. And that's the kind of environment I wanted to work in as well.
Well, see, that our whole conversation today is going to be about your perspective on what you would want as a client, but you're now serving clients. And that's is still a very unique mindset, and it's very difficult for service providers to be in that mindset because they haven't been the client. They have what they have, and they're selling what they're selling and what they have, and their goals are not necessarily aligned with the perspectives of meeting the client where they are and their mindset and their needs of where they are. Put yourself in their shoes. I mean, if there's any better case, it's you. Yeah, I'm sure you put yourself in your shoes every single time because you were in their shoes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know how it feels for sure.
Jeff, can you, since you're talking about going to Vietnam and working with people, in a different culture, another place in the world, how did you gather the two groups together to make, steps forward? Because I know that, early in my career, I actually worked on a cruise ship, and it was super multicultural. I had people from all over the world, different culture, different ways of working. And, when you have one aspect of work, right, this is what I expect, this is what we want to put forward. And then, going over and speaking with them, and then also making sure that everything is cohesive. How do you make sure that we keep everything together?
Well, so there's the old adage, seek to understand before you seek to be understood. And I try to live that out in my daily life all the time, but it especially is true when you're dealing with another culture, another company, another group. And when you go over and you understand more about, I tried to understand their working model. What's a day in the life look like of a developer, of a tester, of a business analyst, of a manager, of a director, of the managing director, HR operations, how do things just work? And then instead of making their lives align with my schedule and life easy for me, I find balances of where I can compromise and they're 12 hours different from us most of the time, 11 to 12 hours. So that means sometimes I've got early morning calls and they have late night calls. And sometimes I have late night calls and they have early morning calls. And there's a trade-off, there's a balance. And we just try to strike that throughout every kind of engagement or project that we work on. And then we make the most of the offline conversations. It's being very crisp and clear in emails, in Slack messages or Jira tickets, or however you're communicating. And this is for me working with my folks or for our clients working with their teams as well. But it's knowing that you're communicating in a variety of ways. It's either verbally through an online meeting, it's asynchronously through tickets and messaging. And then the best case scenario is getting to visit, whether it's the team visiting here in the US, and sometimes we have folks fly over and visit the team in the US. We've got a couple people upstairs right now visiting one of our clients, and they're here for about 4 weeks, and they're doing training and knowledge transfer and just cultural sharing and team building. And sometimes we get clients that will go to Vietnam as well and experience the culture of the environment and really understand the work environment that they have. And it gives them a better appreciation of the communication, best communication styles and ways to show appreciation across the board.
Just to add on to that, can you update us a little bit on the current state of development and co-location in Vietnam when a client would come to visit? What does that environment look like? How did that differ? I mean, I don't know if you can remember back that far or were experiencing that, but obviously pre-COVID, 99% of people came in to a central work environment. What is that environment like now, and what's it going to look like in a couple of years from now, if you may guess?
Oh, it's great. It's so everybody around the world went from 100% in the office to 100% lockdown to gradually getting back into the office. So we're in very much a hybrid mode where we have some teams that are required to go in because they're supporting everyone and they need to have in their infrastructure to support. So our IT and operations and HR and security and those guys and gals. A lot of our teams, we actually institute a flexi work model where 2 to 3 times a week, everybody needs to join in the office and pick those days so that they're overlapping at least a couple days. And that's important for a couple of reasons. Key meetings that need to have everybody collaborating and working together. Sometimes it's easier to do a whiteboard session when you can actually have an actual whiteboard and not just doing things over a Zoom call. But it's important for team cohesion and culture that you work hard and then you go out for a drink or you go out for dinner afterwards and you tell stories about the day and you catch up on family events and those kind of things. Those are the things we did when we took for granted when everybody was 100% in the office. But we're reinstituting that to make sure that we keep the employees happy and healthy and the group culture there.
And what about what about the focus on hiring people just in Vietnam as to other countries or regions of the world? So, for example, in Latin America, it's become common practice because they speak a common language, except for Brazil, of course, where when you say you're let's say a Costa Rican-based business today, that could mean 10% in Costa Rica, 90%, spread out across from, Mexico to Argentina. Now in Eastern Europe, it's slightly different because they have different languages and different cultures, and it's not quite as easy just to, have people blended in all these different countries, although, English is a common language, but still it's not as easy as say Latin America. And I would imagine Asia is somewhat the same way as that. So what is the current status of KMS in the old way of, very strong co-location in just Vietnam versus today and in the future? How are you seeing that?
Well, Ho Chi Minh City is where our primary office is, and we've got around 11 to 1,200 people in that office. It's a city of 9 million people, 9 million, 10 million people. So it's a pretty big source of talent. Hundreds of thousands of folks in the tech field just in that city alone. So we've got a very strong base of talent, new talent coming in out of university, and existing talent, experienced talent in the market as well. So I feel pretty good that we're not going to run out of people if we just focus in Ho Chi Minh. We have diversified a little bit and moved up to Da Nang, which is in the central coastal area. We've got a smaller operation, a smaller office there. Again, it just gives us exposure to a different set of humans, a different set of experiences, and different things we can offer our employees. If their hometown was Da Nang and they wanted to stay with us, but they needed to go home to be with family, we've got an office in Da Nang they can go to, right? So if you get diverse locations, you have more things you can offer your employees and help to retain, which is a key differentiator for us because retention is something that's key, very critical for the client. And we put a lot of attention on making sure we keep our folks happy and try to retain as much as possible so that that talent stays with the client as long as possible. And then exploring options, we could go up to Hanoi, but we try to stay in the major metro areas, so that's where the tech talent is concentrated.
And what about other regions of the world?
Yeah, so we have operations in Mexico, and we have a couple of locations in Mexico. We settled in Guadalajara first, and then we've got another location in Ciudad Guzman, which is south of Guadalajara, about.
And why are you doing that?
So we expanded to Mexico a little over a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now, primarily to provide nearshore options in addition to offshore options. And this is where some clients may have very, very distinct, very, very specific time zone requirements or working alignment where offshore doesn't work for them. Even though it's cheaper, they're willing to pay a little more if somebody can be time zone aligned. Well, we're losing out on that kind of business, so we acquired a company in Mexico for that purpose. So now we have a presence in Mexico, and we can compete with companies that have maybe only a nearshore need or a combined nearshore and offshore opportunity, or we can leverage.
Is that usually integrated, or is it sort of divide and conquer? Like, if you were to put the two together because of time zones and cultures, if you had a client that was using both, would it usually be like you do this and nearshore does that and offshore does this, or could it be actually integrated?
There's a couple of scenarios where we've seen it integrated. There's a couple other scenarios where it could be integrated with the same client but different bodies of work that they're aligned to. If the company is big enough and they have 5 or 6 projects or big projects in different areas of their company or their business, maybe we have a nearshore team that works with this company or this project and an offshore team that works with that. We have seen opportunities where we're able to leverage talent in both locations and do a couple things. If they're primarily interested in nearshore, we can use offshore to lower the overall price point and stay competitive for them if from a price differentiation. It also enables us to do more 24/7 round the clock development or testing and true follow the sun to support the client. And it's not the client has to follow the sun. We're actually following the sun for the client and doing work around the clock. And we've seen that as a very positive, a very very powerful option that we have to provide. And yeah.
Now is there anywhere else besides Vietnam and Mexico that you guys are currently working?
Well, the U.S. We do have some folks in the U.S. I'm in the U.S. our executive team, our sales and marketing, commercial team, some finance folks are here in the U.S. We also have a group of folks that do consulting work for us. A few contractors, a few full-time employees that are solution architects, CTO level, or they call themselves recovering CTOs. But they come in and help us with a lot of our due diligence assessments and tech diligence work. We have some data science, data engineers, and then some leads that came over from Vietnam that support a couple of our larger clients as on-site leads. And they do, we talked a little bit about bridging time zones. This is a client that has very specific needs for requirements and design that happens here on site, but they really want the cheaper price point or the more cost-efficient price point and effective use of utilization of folks in offshore to drive speed and efficiency of their projects. So we're really doing follow the sun work for them. But that person in the US really serves as a bridge for communications and as another quality control check for our teams to make sure the client's happy.
So now that you're working out of multiple time zones, how does that impact your project timelines, your deliverables, and what have you done to make sure that you can mitigate any issue that arises when, you have a team in Mexico, you have a team in Vietnam, then you have some folks in the US, and there's a lot of time slippage going on, and you want to just make sure everyone's on the same plate? Because I know even where I'm 3 hours ahead or I'm 3 hours behind or not, you want to make sure you have enough overlap in the day to make sure you can get things done, because I know how things go. It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm done for the day, but your team might need something and it's a few hours, they still have a few hours to go in their day and they need something and you're at the gym or you're walking your dog. Just, make sure that you're keeping everything on time and, you're in the pocket you need to be.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Number one, the The silly answer is I just never sleep, and I'm actually a robot, which I've been accused of a couple times. But the reality is defining periods of time, because we all need work-life balance. Clients need work-life balance. Vendors need work-life balance. Consultants need work-life balance. Leadership needs it. So you have to be disciplined in terms of, this is the window of time when I'm going to be available to answer questions and give feedback. This is a period of time where it's off limits. And my folks know that. And I know that for them as well. And then we've got an expectation that, I can send you a message at 3 a.m, but I'm not expecting you to respond to it. I'm just giving it to you asynchronously so that I don't forget about it. And then we make sure, and then we settle up and, when they wake up. But it's respecting those time windows and then making sure that we make the most use of that time when we have the opportunities to sync up. Now, the other side of this is, if things are going truly sideways, and in the software world, things go sideways. They just do. You can't avoid it. Everybody's online. Everybody's on the phone. We may do 24/7, staying up all night. Those types of events have happened very rarely, but when they need to happen, we don't make time zone an issue. We figure out how to make things work. So I don't know. That's probably the best way to address that question.
Yeah, it's great because I know that I have kids, so I always check, and they're in college, so I always check my phone if I wake up in the middle of the night before I head to bed, because it's next to me. And on occasion, I'll see a message from Andy, but I'll notice it says notification silence. So he had to get that thought out of his head. He slacked me, but he doesn't expect me to respond, at that time. And I'm like, I'll respond because, okay, I saw it. Now I have the thought in my head. I know he's not going to read it till he gets up, but it's the same thing. We always try to keep everybody, time zones are sometimes they're tricky, sometimes they're not, depending on the overlap themselves. But I know you talked about it earlier. What method do you find to be, the best to communicate through that? Is it an email? Is it Slack? I know Jira is for the tickets, but what have you found when you have to communicate across time zones? What is the best method to really get the point across? Is it a Zoom call, or do you really find that, yes, there has to be an in-person meeting to really get the point across? I know that's not always the most logistically sound way to do it, but what communication method has worked best for you?
It's a great question. There's a variety of methods, and I think it depends on the type of thing you're trying to communicate. We have regularly scheduled meetings, status meetings, stand-up meetings, account status, where we talk about all of the accounts and go through line by line, how are things going, budget review meetings, all of those. Those are generally going to be face-to-face, where they require a conversation, where I've got a question, I want to get it addressed, and it needs to happen real time. There are one-off conversations where I may be working with a technical account manager on a specific account. I may handle that via email, because I know that email is something I'm going to want to forward the answer to my client. And then it just streamlines the conversation, and everybody's included. The person I'm working with, and then I can forward it on to the client, and everybody's included in the stream of communication. That's key in any communication, because too many times you can assume that everybody's on the same page. And if you assume too much, you'll get burned. And then one of the things we do internally is we'll have Google Chat channels where we'll invite 5 people working on this deal or working on this problem for this project. Here's what we're going to do in our inside voice. This is how we talk about things inside and figure out what's going on and make sure that we're doing everything we can to satisfy the client. And then the summary would be in an email that would go to the client or to a different group that here's the result of what we talked about. So it really just depends on who needs to be involved. Is it real-time activities, or is it something that needs to be resolved in the moment? If it's something that needs to be resolved in the moment, those are best to just schedule a call, get on the same page, and then document the results in an email after.
Yeah. Jeff, I'm going to switch slightly back to the fact that, for example, when Accelerance certifies partners, when we travel the world and we assess all these development shops, and people always ask me, it's like, well, what's a, we do like 500 different data points as far as assessing shops. But for me, as a CEO, I'm always looking to a service provider in terms of their leadership and their key client interfacing people. What breadth and depth of these people have grown up in the U.S. or been educated in the U.S. or, more importantly, been on the client side of things, like you, for example. And so I mentioned breadth and depth because a lot of service providers might have one person, typically in sales or in marketing, who's a very smart, slick salesperson, and they have their value props and stuff, but that person is not to be seen in regards to client management or project management or interfacing. And if the person gets hit by a bus, then the whole thing falls apart. And so I'm going to reiterate that it's great to have a leader like you, having come from the client side. But speaking to breadth and depth and redundancy, can you talk a little bit about, do you have relationships with all of the clients? Are you very active in those relationships? I want our service providers to lead clients and lead it from the perspective of the client. You bring the perspective of the client. You know what clients need and want. And rather than clients say, like, I want this, and the service provider says, well, I'm giving you that, it's better to have you saying, like, well, this is in your best interest. I've been there. I've done that. I've been on your side. I've been in your shoes. So can you talk a little bit about the breadth and depth at KMS and how you create that redundancy and that depth of interaction and being on the client side of things?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the guy that hired me. Had the same kind of experience as I did, times 10. And I think that might have been one of the reasons why he liked me as a candidate for KMS, because it was the same type of experience, large enterprise coming in to help KMS to be a good service provider. We have a great group of local delivery directors, senior directors, that are our primary interface point with our clients, that have a wide variety of experiences at clients, as a individual contributor for companies, and now on the servicing side. And I have the utmost confidence in all of them, putting them in front of the client, representing KMS and looking at their best interest, or having their best interest at heart. I have a good relationship with all of the clients that we have today on our software side. And then Koshal, who's our CTO, he runs our healthcare practice, and he does the same thing for all of his healthcare accounts. And but it can't be just he and I interfacing alone, because, like you said, one of us gets hit by a bus, well, there's 50% of that leadership gone. We build teams, strong teams, so that we have the ability to scale. We have the ability to cover a lot of ground from that perspective. And that oversight helps. One of your earlier questions about, projects running sideways or keeping things in line, those teams provide oversight. They help to manage the relationship with the clients, make sure the client's happy, but they also provide oversight to our offshore team or our nearshore team to ask the tough questions. Are we doing this right? Are we doing that right? Is this the right thing to do for the client? And making sure that stays central, and everything we do is doing the right thing by the client. And they do a fantastic job.
Great. Another criteria that we look at in terms of service providers is their definition of expertise or specialty or sweet spot, and how they defend that, and how they build a culture around that. I don't like service providers who maybe rightfully say they can do everything or they can do a lot of things. I just want to hear about 2 or 3 things, and not 2 or 3 things they've done or people that they've recruited, but in the last 12 to 18 months, what is their sweet spot? Like when they recruit people, do they recruit it for specific technology or vertical? Those people that are gathering together and working with other professionals in a similar focus, they'll last longer. There'll be lower turnover. It'll be more dynamic culture. And I really appreciate service providers that will defend a sweet spot and reject things that fall outside of it. And actually, when you do P&L analysis of clients, typically those clients that last the longest and have the best profit margins because there's lower turnover and it's easier to recruit specialists because they're coming into an environment that have people like them. It's like little mini Googles, and they all just appreciate smart people, appreciate being with smart people. Do you guys do that? And what is your definition of your sweet spot? Like things that you kill. Like clients don't want to be paying for or subsidizing service providers learning on their own dime or recruiting on their own dime. They just you've done it 6 times before in the last 18 months. Do it again for me and just do it slightly better now that you have all this experience. How do you define that?
No, it's a great question. Well, I'll start off with, I'm not going to tell you I can do everything because I already know you don't like that. Although the sweet spot for KMS for many, many years has been software development. And I say that in terms of SaaS ISVs. We know how to build software product companies. We've built our own. We've been owner operators of several companies. We've built them and spun them out and had very successful exits. We've got several companies that we have good relationship with that we've built and spun off, and they're operating on their own independently. And we know what it's like to be in the shoes of the owner, the founder, the CEO, the CTO that is trying to get new features out the door and trying to build revenue and retain customers and keep their product up to date and modern, those kind of things. Those are the things we know how to do. And from a technology perspective, doesn't matter the tech stack. We bring in solid developers with solid computer science, computer engineering, quality engineering backgrounds. You get that solid foundation of good hygiene in terms of what to do to build sound code, secure code, user-centric code or applications. The technology, the language, the syntax is a lot more flexible and easier to flex between. Similar to the cloud environments, different hyperscalers have a lot of similarities. You can jump from one to the other fairly quickly now, easier than you could maybe 5-10 years ago. Now, to get a little more specific, we do have a healthcare specific part of our business. So 40% of our business, 40% of our business, I believe, don't quote me on the number, is in the healthcare space. We do healthcare tech. So we're selling to healthcare technology companies. We have a smaller portion of our business, which focuses on the Asia Pacific region and banking and finance or financial and insurance companies. And they focus on APAC specific clients themselves. And then the rest of the business, which is a larger chunk of it, is pure software, which we go to market looking specifically at auto tech or fintech type of companies. But we have a wide range of different industries that are represented in the client base that we have, but they're all software companies.
So to flip that around, what kind of scenarios, clients, attitudes, conditions would you rather not be knocking on that you don't want to be interacting with? Like, what are red flags when you're doing your due diligence on the client, and if you can't get beyond that, it's not something you want to be involved with?
Yeah. So opportunistic.
It's a long laundry list, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I can be pretty specific. Opportunistically, there isn't a conversation. We love having conversations with everyone, right? Because you learn and you might uncover something that they didn't know they needed. But the scenario that probably comes to mind that is the least likely for me to get excited about is I've got a team that I need to replace of certain number of people in India that I'm already paying $12 an hour, I need to replace them. And we're not a low
Vino's
cost.
pretty cheap.
Yeah, not that cheap. So we're not a low cost, bulk volume, high volume provider like you're going to find in India or in some other countries where we're just going to throw bodies at a problem. Those are the types of scenarios that are less likely for us to get excited about. Our model is dedicated, managed team model, where we're providing a scrum team or multiple scrum teams to solve very specific problems. And a majority of the time we work with our clients, we're involved either in taking over the support of a core product or application that they own and is making them a lot of money and they're trying to sustain, or modernizing that application to a new technology, or building something net new from scratch that their existing team doesn't have the capability to do or doesn't have the technical chops to do. Those are the things we bring to the table, and those are the types of opportunities that we get really excited about. The tougher the challenge, the better.
And what typically sways a client that is, being inundated with a number of lower cost offshore alternatives, and probably alternatives that probably say like, yeah, we can do everything, and we're half the price of KMS. Like, how if that prospect is open to your value propositions, what might you say to them to not only overcome but add additional value above and beyond, even though you're still cost effective. I mean, you're ridiculously cost effective versus all these other alternatives, whether it's domestic or other shore or domestic boutique. There's so many more expensive ones, but there's also unlimited number of service providers that are not going to lose on price. They're always going to go lower and lower and lower. So what is that secret combination of facts and benefits that you provide that overcome that?
Yeah. Well, I can't give away all the secret sauce.
Sure.
But what I can say is it's about.
But if I'm a client, I want to hear it.
Yeah. So as a client, I'm gonna to share those details. But the real thing is to focus on the value and the experience that we have given. Search for the use cases, search for the scenarios of work that we have done. What is our body of work? Go and talk to our clients. Go and talk to people that work with us. They will tell you, oh my gosh, yes, they were great. This is what they did. This is how they did it. This is how we addressed these time zone issues. This is how they made this work really well for us. Here are the things that didn't work well. These are the things that we could have done better and help the next client around. We have that kind of relationship with our clients that they're not afraid to. They'll toot our horn for us, and but they will also share the real story, because not everything goes perfectly. There's things that you learn along the way and you adjust and you get better. And those are the things that we work with our clients, and we try to take that forward with the next client, the next client, the next client.
I mean, between having offshore and nearshore and having domestic leadership and a breadth and depth of leadership, like I was talking about, and having leadership that were that have been in the shoes of clients, clients that are decision makers that have to, bet their functional farm on a relationship. I mean, those are a lot of good qualities that you bring to the table. And I'm not here to sell. I'm here to be like, if I spent my career being like a Jeff Scott of service providers. I come from Cognizant and divisional management and Cognizant for many years. And when I look at smaller and mid-sized companies, no one's going to sell me. No one's going to smoke me. I know from where I come from, and I know how to look in the corners and look under the rug and determine whether or not it's true credibility and trustworthiness. And because of my former role.
Right.
And like you're bringing the same amount of in the shoes of a leader that I think a lot of clients would value. So.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Jeff, it's been fantastic having you on the show today. Your insights into the client's perspective when choosing a software development partner have been incredibly valuable. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. For our listeners, be sure to subscribe to Software Without Borders and leave us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. We have more great content coming your way, so stay tuned and join us next time for another deep dive into the world of technology and business. Thank you for listening to Software Without Borders.